Hello, and welcome to the Jocelyn Moore Show. I'm your host, Jocelyn Moore, and as always, we're here to inform, inspire, and entertain with dynamic conversations that matter. Today, we're going to talk about the hidden lives we often overlook, that beneath the robes and the sermons, spiritual leaders are deeply human. We'll explore how they navigate the profound loss of loved ones and the unique weight they carry while grieving alongside their community. We are honored to welcome back Reverend Dr. George F. DeFord, a retired member of the Baltimore-Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church, where he served for 41 years of ordained ministry. Reverend DeFord joined us to discuss a deeply personal and moving story, his memoir, Oh My Child, the dilemma of clergy confronting personal grief.
What stimulated me to write Oh My Child, is two things. One, the loss of my son, Christopher, who was an adult child at the time, and the grief, the trauma of his death, and the grief that I experienced while at the same time serving a congregation. And during that time, I was uh, suppressing, the grief that I was experiencing, which was not good. And then there was a death of a teenager in my congregation, which exacerbated, my grief. And then I began to wonder, were there other colleagues who were experiencing similar kinds of situations? And then I remembered when I was serving a congregation in Baltimore, a colleague of mine who's deceased now, his son died. And when I was funeralizing him, I saw my colleague just deteriorated into an emotional outburst during the funeral. And I wondered within myself, is this the way a clergy is supposed to react to death? Uh, but more importantly, in reference to a family member, and in this case, a child. And so that's what sort of guided us, motivated me to write about this experience.
When you talked about the clergy who expressed itself during the funeral, were people, the congregation, were they surprised to see a clergy expressing him or herself at the funeral?
I can't speak for those persons at that time who experienced when I was funeralizing my colleague's son. But for me, coming from the, I guess, traditional understanding of how clergy, should behave during that time, I thought that he should have kept those emotions in. But as I progressed in my ministry, I began to discover that the countless number of funerals that we do not only has impact on the family, but it has a profound impact on the pastor. And I found myself suppressing my emotions until we got to the point of Christopher. And I felt like my deceased colleague at that time. I just wanted to open up, but then I felt constrained to maintain the persona of being, a clergy. Moreover, I thought if I would have opened myself up like that, that would have been detrimental to the perception of my spirituality and faith. And so I believe, being transparent, that, as a human being, I have these experiences, and we have to not suppress it. to be transparent. And moreover, the congregation should understand this, um, that, clergy are human beings, and the notion of being a super saint and able to deal with these things, to me, is a misnomer. Um, that's just my opinion, and I might have other colleagues who would speak, you know, uh, contrary to what I'm saying.
It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard, but we're going to talk more about that a little bit later in the interview. Okay, we're going to talk about that. You opened your memoir by stating that grief and mourning are fundamentals to life. Could you clarify the difference between those two concepts?
Grief and mourning. Uh, Grief, we have sort of used interchangeably with mourning, but I think further study reveals that grief is the inner experience, and mourning is the manifestation of what we're experiencing on the inside. Let me unpack that. For example, in some cultures, uh, to express one's uh, the grief is kept within, but the mourning is the exhibition or the manifestation of what's happening on the inside. For example, in some cultures, persons will wear a black ribbon around their armband, or women will wear black dresses for a year. That shows that they have experienced death and they're still are, in a state of grief. The mourning is the outward show. When we have funeral services, that's mourning. Uh, uh, Being, crying and uh, in the black tradition, whooping it out, and fainting. All of these things are a manifestation of what's happening on the inside. Grief is internal, but it manifests itself on the outside in terms of those behaviors that we reflect to the community.
While writing, were there times when you need to take a break from the emotional weight of it all? It's like, this is too much. I have to.
You're on point. It was difficult for me to write, uh, uh, very difficult, because the trauma of his death, even though I understood he was going to transition, but still there was trauma. There was a wound, an overwhelming situation that I had no control over, and that's what trauma is. But as I began to write, I was reliving those experiences of his declining, and even at the time when he actually passed, which was at 4:15 a.m. on May 28th at 2018, room 6 in the University of Maryland Hospital. And that left an indelible impression upon me. And as I was writing, I was reliving the experience very clearly as a video clip. And it was painful for me at that point. And in the subsequent days, for me, I was reliving, that experience. And even to the point, not to be too graphic, although there's something known as the final apnea. And that's when the body, when at the very last moment, when the heart stops and all the air comes out, there might be a movement. And just as that moment happened, he kind of raised up a bit and went back. And I've reflected over that moment and metaphorically said that it was death pulling him out of his body. And so those things I still relive. that is part of my grief experience.
Did you think at one time, I can't finish the book, I just can't do it?
Yes and no. Sometimes when I work on something, I'm sort of driven to finish it, and even in the midst of pain, I still worked at it. And there were times I just had to say, like, I gotta let this go and leave. But then I would come back to it. I guess it's part of my personality that I will continue to work at something till completion.
Early in your ministry, you felt the need to suppress your grief and carry on as nothing has happened, like we talked about earlier. Do you believe this was influenced by the pressure of a stigma, or within the Black church, where clergy seeking help is something seen as a weakness?
I can cite a couple of things. One, when I was working on this project, I mean, book, um, I was talking to a clergy friend in Baltimore, and he told me that during the 80s, I believe it was during the 80s, 70 or late 80s, that there was a certain hospital in Baltimore that privately had uh, uh, a place where clergy could go for counseling, and it was not disclosed. It was amongst the clergy because they did not want that to get out, that one's pastor was seeking, um, you know, psychotherapy, because that would, at that time, it would have been indicative that that person was not as spiritually grounded as they were presumed to be. And even some of the clergy had those feelings that if it got out that I was getting counseling, then I was not strong in my faith, or I'm not qualified to really be a pastor. And these are notions that had come back from, prior generations of ministers. In fact, I discussed in the book one family whose brother was was a PK's, and even in the midst of his family, when his father passed, or even when his mother passed, he would not show his emotions in the presence of his family, but he withdrew and isolated himself. And the question was, how can I show myself being, emotional because of the um, death, because he was a pastor? And I think this is a notion that had come back from generations ago. And, this is just my observation. I used to say some of those old pastors looked like they were sucking on a lemon because they were suppressing their feelings. And, they were always, there's no smile on their face. And that was just in my experience. But they would not, pastors would not reflect the impact of the situation. How are you going to tell your congregation, be strong in the midst of your trials and tribulations, and then you come up there boo-hooing in front of the people? That was just a, you know,
It's kind of
comment, but
hard. It's kind of hard.
it is. So you got to always show that face of strength, and unshakable faith.
Um, in chapter 1, you wrote after your son's death, prayers prayed, I believe, were answered. I say that because given my son's fatigue with being sick, he received his healing through death. Now, I have my own interpretation, but I'm curious, what it means to you?
Well, I've said, as I've grown in the years, that um, death can be a source of healing to answer prayer. All right, what am I talking about? Uh, Chris had suffered uh, kidney disease, and he was on the transplant list 6 or 7 years ago, maybe longer. And because he had a special blood type that he could not receive, and he had to have a specific type of kidney or blood type. And there was a person who died, and when that person died, of course, he donated his kidneys, and um, because he was the same blood type as my son, um, the hospital, when they got the call, he was rushed to the hospital for the transplant, and he had been on the list only 5 weeks, and that was miraculous. And when he received the kidney, there was nobody else in the hospital who could use it, so he received 2 kidneys.
Mm.
And so the doctor said, "Well, now you're walking around with 4 kidneys." Well, I learned at that time that once those kidneys are not used, they shrink. And so the transplanted kidneys, the 2, they became operating in his body. Well, this had gone on for 5 or 6 years, and then, they began to deteriorate. And uh, Chris was in and out on dialysis, I forget how long. And one day, my wife and I went over to the hospital to see him. And he just said to me, he said, "Dad, I'm tired. I'm just tired, Dad." And, I prayed, as I would. I guess I was expected to pray, especially for my child. And then 6 or 7 months later, he was back in the hospital. And this was in April, um, March or April 2018. And he was in ICU, and he didn't want my grandson to see him in that condition. And he just steadily was deteriorating. Um, Severe loss of weight, and to a point that, he became comatose. And his wife stood by him, all the way to, she didn't want to see him die. And so when she called us and told him, he wouldn't make it through to the next morning, because conference was that week, we immediately went back up to Baltimore, and it was on a Sunday night. And he, at 4 o'clock, at 4:15, that's when he left. Um, and to say that, prayer is healing, I see it from the standpoint of the one who's suffering, that, um, in a way, it's relief from this old body that is, has been, uh, I don't want to, I qualify my words when I say it's been abused by time. But, the old work clothes of the flesh began to, to decay, you know. And so that in itself, I see, is a release, is a liberation from the work clothes of the flesh. I think that, and this is my own theological understanding of this, that the reason family members keep praying for a person to stay is for their own, and I'm saying this qualitatively in a qualified way, that it's for their own selfish feelings of love.
Do you think, do you think when people say, "Oh, come back, we want you here with us," is that, do you think that part is being selfish? I mean, you don't want them in any more pain.
That's my statement. I'm not disputing the fact that people are truly love someone and don't want to be left or abandoned, as we may feel, but at the same time, uh, when we reach a certain point in, I believe when we reach a certain point in life, that, folk get tired. My mother-in-law was 97 when she, contracted COVID and was hospitalized, and she was in a room next to mine. And one of the things that she was in one of her, because the medication she was taking when she was with us and all, sometimes she just broke down and cried, said, "I'm just tired. I'm tired. I'm tired." Um, and I've heard other seniors say the same thing. And so that's why I use the term. I think it's liberating for one to be relieved of these old work clothes of the flesh. Not that I'm trying to encourage it now, understand me, but I want to scripturally, the 90th Psalm it says, we're guaranteed, we're supposed to have 70 years, and if by labor, maybe 80, but then that's going to be, it's going to be labor and sorrow. So
I had an uncle who uh, passed when he was a baby. The doctor said he wouldn't make it. He wouldn't live to be a adult, and he lived to be 103 years old. So no one knows.
no one knows what expiration date God has given us, but
You may think you know, but you don't know. Okay, let's talk now about your conversations with your interviews with pastors who have lost their loved ones, their children. What surprises you the most in those conversations that you had with them?
their transparency, at least with me, about because we were all in a certain community of clergy persons who lost a loved one, and several of us who have lost children. So there was common ground there where we could speak, and I think those that I spoke with, one was a clergy woman who was open about her loss. Another clergyman, uh, he was open about his loss. Um, let's see, was there another clergywoman who lost two sons? And I think these persons were rather matter of fact, open, transparent with me. While several sought, help, others did not.
But right before, I hate to say this, but before we conclude, all right, this is about the end of the interview. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers that you haven't shared, you would like briefly share with our viewers?
I just hope that, for those who are in congregations and be more understanding of their pastor's circumstances when there is this type of occurrence of death in their family, to extend to them the grace of time to heal. And if they need to get, counseling, let them do it and not to look down on them.
You're busy? Man, here's your book right here. What's this? Oh, my child, my child. It's a remarkable book. Where can viewers reach you or follow you?
Well, I know that that book is on Amazon.
Are your books on Amazon?
Yeah, one of them, the Miraculous, the company that I was with, they're no longer operating. So they might be able to get that on Amazon or on eBook. And hopefully within the next 3 or 4 months, I'll have this Miraculous out, and they'll be able to get it from me or on Amazon.
Like I said, you're a very busy man, Rodney Ford. You just keep on moving, don't you?
I just hope and pray the Lord will allow me to put one foot in front of the other.
And thank you for being on the show. The book is a must read. It really is a must read for all of us. All of us. We will learn so much from here. Something that we don't really think about. We don't think about until you read this book. Then you would truly understand. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
For our viewers at home watching, if you like what you see, subscribe to The Jocelyn Moore Show. Want to be a guest on our show? Head over to our website, www.jmentertainment.info. On the homepage, click on About and follow directions to be a guest. If you have any questions about today's show or past or future shows, just click Contact on our website and submit a message. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, take care and keep watching.